Hello, everyone. Welcome to this event. I think we're going to start with a minute or so because I see that many attendees are still entering the room. So, Claire, would it be okay if I start?
Go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this joint event from the European Association for Electricity DSOs and Gas DSOs for Sustainability. It's very good that we have both the electricity DSOs and the gas DSOs together here today to discuss about a very important topic, sector coupling. So sector coupling has been in the, let's say, the attention within the energy sector since quite a while. And one of the important publications in that regard was the European Commission publishing their EU system integration strategy just about 1 year ago. So we have a very dense agenda today. So I won't take too much time. So myself, I'm Tim Sietekat. I'm a research fellow at the Florence School of Regulation, and I will be moderating this event. So first we will start with a keynote speech from the Commission. After we will have opening speeches from the chairman of both associations, followed by companies' perspectives. So companies from the associations, which will present their points of view. And this will be followed by several invited guests presenting case studies or interesting country cases of system integration. Then there will be a Q&A session. So everybody who wants to submit their questions can do so in the Q&A box. There is also the opportunity to vote up several questions, because that makes my life also a lot easier. If people vote up the questions, then I can see which ones are actually the most popular for the audience. And those ones then can be asked to anyone who was in the panel or one of the company representatives. And in the end, we end with a closing speech. So without further ado, I think we can go to Mr. Christoph Lessing from the European Commission, who will give a bit of the European viewpoint on the issue, on the opportunity of sector coupling. So please, Christoph, the word is yours.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes, I can hear you well. We don't see you, but we hear you well.
You will in a second. Sorry, one would have thought that after some month of pandemic, we should have sorted all the technical issues, but that should be there any moment.
Okay, yes.
Good. Has it worked?
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. So first of all, thank you very much for the invitation for today. It's an honor to introduce such a distinguished audience. I just want to say some introductory words to kick off your discussion today. And it will not surprise you very much when I start with the overall objective of the European Green Deal, and in particular with the aim of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55% by 2030. As you know, this is the overall goal, which is driving a lot of the Commission's legislative agenda in this field, and it's also the policy background for the discussions on sector coupling today. In order to achieve this goal, the Commission has adopted on the 14th of July of this year a set of proposals to make the EU's climate, energy, land use, transport, and taxation policies fit for 55, i.e. fit for the transition to the 55% reduction by 2030. Achieving these emission reductions is crucial to Europe's goal of becoming the world's first climate neutral continent by 2050, and hence making the European Green Deal a reality. In line with the Fit for 55 commitments, I think it's fair to assume that natural gas will have a role to play in the transition process, but it's also an equally important to be aware that the gas sector will undergo significant change over the next years, and that the mix of gases which will be consumed will progressively have to be decarbonized to reach climate neutrality. This has been recognized in the Commission's energy system integration and hydrogen strategies published last year by the Commission. Now, that means that unabated natural gas will play a decreasing role in the overall energy mix of member states, and it will increasingly be replaced by renewables, renewable and low carbon gases in line with technological developments. In particular, as regards the gas sector, we expect that biogas, biomethane, and hydrogen will provide sustainable options for decarbonization across a wide range of sectors, and in particular for those sectors for whom electrification is not a cost-effective option. I think it's fair to say that in that overall context, also the gas distribution networks will play a very important role in the shift towards climate-friendlier options. We know that most of the biomethane installations which currently exist in Europe are connected at the level of the DSO grids. And from a policy perspective, we are of course very much looking into possibilities to improve the access of biomethane to the wholesale markets and allow biomethane to compete fully in European gas markets at all levels. To achieve a better integrated energy market and to fully support our decarbonization efforts, we also have to ensure that the development of our energy infrastructure reflects the synergies that exist between the existing gas and electricity sectors. So for a long time, we have looked at these networks as distinct system, and we will have to move to a more holistic approach, looking at the entirety of the energy system, including electricity, heat, renewable production, and that of course includes both the transmission and the distribution networks. Finally, addressing methane emissions is a very important objective, and it is so along the entirety of the relevant value chain. Tackling methane emissions is certainly very high on the Commission's political objectives. By giving you this short introduction, I've tried to also sketch out the policy context within which the current revision of the existing gas rules is taking place. So we are in fact working on a package that will essentially try to achieve two things. Namely, on the one hand, to facilitate the integration of renewable and low carbon gases in the existing gas grids. I've already referred to the market access for biomethane, but there are also other issues involved, such as gas quality in the existing networks, access of renewable gases to LNG terminals, and topics around the integration of network planning between electricity, gas, and hydrogen, future hydrogen networks. But that is, of course, only one aspect of what we are trying to achieve. The second is to provide the necessary regulatory framework, allowing for the development of a European hydrogen market within a dedicated hydrogen infrastructure, which would then allow hydrogen to become a key component of the European energy sector going forward. We have already carried out an extensive consultation exercise on this package and have gathered a lot of input from a very broad range of interested parties that will help us prepare the relevant legislative proposals. The voice of the DSO community is very important to us in that context, as the distribution networks will play a very, very important role in the transition I have sketched out. In that context, I wish you a very fruitful debate about these topics, and thank you very, very much for your attention.
Thank you a lot, Christoph, for this very comprehensive overview of the viewpoint or the strategy of where the European Commission wants to go to, and what are the important elements in that strategy. I think it's very clear and a good, let's say, basis to start this discussion. So now we have two opening speeches. First is Christian Buchel, who's the chair of E.DSO, and also executive board member of Enedis, the French electricity DSO. And then there is Paulo Gallo, who is CEO at Italgas and chairman of GD4S. Both have 5 minutes. So please, Christian, the floor is yours.
Thanks. Can you hear me? Yeah, fine. So good afternoon, friends, colleagues. And thank you very much, Christoph Lessenich, for your, I would say, inspiring speech. Yeah? I'm very pleased with Paulo to open this event because we're both gas neutral market facilitator, and the way we try to act together, I think it's important. And definitely today is not a question of electricity, gas. It's a question of about future, how to deal with the transformation in the energy system. It has been said by Christoph, in order to prepare a better world. The biggest challenge is yet lying ahead of us. Yes, we have done and together, and I'm very happy as chairman of E.DSO that the clean energy package put on the forefront the role of the DSOs, but the challenge is still lying ahead of us. So pressure, why? Because pressure is mounting for all energy carriers to equip themselves with a lot of attributes of strategic leadership and vision. Sector coupling, sometimes I think that sector coupling is coming some kind of buzzword in Europe, but it's much more than this. Yes, it's about a global vision of a system, and this vision that we can and must achieve in the energy sector can help us to handle the transformation. Last year, the European Commission shared its vision in its strategy for energy system integration. The need for more efficient and circular energy system has been stressed, and we are very happy with this. Deep electrification, deep and massive electrification based on increased renewable energy, and the uptake of renewable and low carbon fuels is hard to abide in the sector. So the new integrated energy system will definitely not happen. And we have released, as you know, a study about investment. The integrated energy system will not happen without massive investments. And so we do need this investment, but we do need also some kind of change of mindset. And this is about this afternoon, because investments need to be properly planned and target toward a reliable network infrastructure. The benefits in terms of sustainable green recovery and jobs could be massive. We're all convinced of this. So as chairman of E.DSO, we represent the electricity grid. It has been said. We are convinced that the fast electrification, the fast and massive electrification of all possible uses is an absolute necessity in Europe to achieve the European climate goals and reach the carbon neutrality. Keeping in mind that European countries do not start from, I would say, from the same point. The role of gas in this transition is different from one country to another, but we have to make this synergy possible, to accelerate, and because one of the big questions is time. Yes, we have not decades to make studies and demos. So nevertheless, the coupling of electricity and gas system through power to gas is really a potential link in this transition to a carbon neutral economy. It could complete, it could help, it could accelerate direct electrification in sectors where direct electrification is not possible for technical reason, for investment reason on customer side, for example. So how should we lead the change to get this most best of it? First, we need to fully decarbonize the EU energy system. It has been said. Then we need more renewables. This means investment, not only in grid, investment for a sector, all the sector of renewables. And the synergy between certain electrical usage, building, mobility, for example, can bring ahead value to the power system in terms of integration of renewables and flexibility. And finally, we must ensure a strong cooperation and well-managed interaction between electricity and gas network. And this is not new, because some of our members in some countries, they are both electricity and gas. But to combine really electricity and gas and bring it on a global vision, this is probably new. Because indeed, we must ensure a cost-effective and sustainable approach to infrastructure needs and investment in the grid. Energy system integration, or I would say the buzzword, yes, sector coupling, is not the miracle to avoid investment. We should be clear on this. We do need investments in electricity. We do need massive integration investments, but sector coupling and the way we strongly coordinate the operation of planning, how we plan, how we build the grid, can across electricity and gas, I mean, can help us to scale this investment. It's a big challenge, but clearly essential to deliver reliable and cost-effective energy services. So where do we need stand as DSOs? Our role is based on four concrete priorities: opt for direct electrification and this is the best, yes, if we can electrify all users, advocate for a potential of power-based solution as flexibility option for highly integrated energy system, come up with solution for the conversion of clean electricity into other vectors where direct electrification is not possible, and foster synergies between all energy-related sectors, infrastructure and technologies. Indeed, sector coupling does not only concern the energy sector. This is, I think, important to mention here. To achieve the energy transition, we must adopt a more holistic approach. And we start here with electricity and gas. We have to have a holistic approach. Many more sectors need to be integrated to fully unleash all the benefits for the energy system, but at the end for the consumer. As neutral market facilitator, DSOs have to take an enabling role with other sectors. I thinking especially on transport sector, yes, with electrical vehicle. This has not only in addition and connect electrical vehicle, but have the common vision on it, buildings, digital technology, flexibility infrastructure, etc. In our E.DSO paper on the energy system integration strategy, we claim that electricity DSOs we are ready to play this role. This is why Paolo, myself, we decided to have these common events, because we can act together, and we as electricity DSOs, we are ready to help the gas sector to create value by helping us to transform Europe and to to have a massive electrification of Europe. So definitely a lot of opportunities. I have two questions to conclude. The first one, how to increase investment by avoiding I would say, to overload the bills of the customer. This is, I think, a common for the Commission, for the companies, for all politicians, how to avoid that the bill of the customer in Europe in the coming decade become not affordable for them. And the second question is how to, I would say, how to handle the pace, yes, because we have no more time. I said it. We have not 3 decades to take a lot of demos and studies and a lot of new regulation. We have to act, and this is the second question. So
okay.
we, as DSOs, we are ready to help this sector. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Christian. Very clear points and very, I would say, complicated questions. I don't think we'll be able to answer both questions exhaustively today, as they are very complicated, but they're necessary to ask. So now over to Paolo Gallo from Italgas and chairman of Gas Distributors for Sustainability. Please.
Thank you. Thank you for the time, and thank you for all distinguished guests to participate to this discussion. I think I have prepared a couple of slides just to follow my presentation and my opening speech. And thank you to Christian for having organized this joint event. I've been, let me say, since probably 20 years that I've been listening about sector coupling, but I've seen up to now very little in terms of cooperation between gas and energy. And I think Christian is right. We need to work very closely in order to really make the sector coupling something real. And I think when we talk about sector coupling, we don't have to think about more electricity, more gas, or position. We need to think about a comprehensive view with the goal to achieve the targets set by the commissions by 2030 and 2050 in a way to make as much as possible effective investment and effective action to reach those targets, with also the benefit of the final customer. For that reason, let me describe the GD4S position about the energy transition that we have. You can have more details if you look at the white paper that we presented at the beginning of 2021. And we think, and I think Christian mentioned that, we think that the more renewable that there will be in the system in order to have a full or a transition in the decarbonization economy, the more renewable we have in the system, the more flexibility we need to look for, because you know very well that the more renewable you put in the system and the more rigid the system is becoming. And we think that the gas network is something that it's the answer to this loss of flexibility. Christian mentioned the power to gas, and that is exactly the point. Gas infrastructure may become, in the future, the place where to store the surplus of energy produced by renewable, and to bring this surplus of energy not only available in different times, but also in different places. And I am also pleased that Christoph from the European Commission has talked about the role of the gas network in the near future, as with the natural gas as the transition, but also for the future, because he mentioned, and we are fully with him, he mentioned about biomethane, biogas, green hydrogen as the future of the gases with low or zero carbon content that has to be, that has to go through the gas network, either transportation, but even more through the distribution network. And the size of the gas infrastructure that are available today in Europe demonstrate that it's an incredible asset that we have in Europe that we can leverage toward the energy transition. And the gas distributors are moving toward that future, because we are not only equipping ourselves to manage biomethane and hydrogen, so different kind of gases, but in doing that, we are upgrading our gas infrastructure to become fully digital. That's the only way in which you can handle different kind of gases, also for the benefit of the customer. But if we move in the second page, I wanted also to picture which is, according to GD4S and the gas DSO, the concept of the sector coupling. I think that in order to do so, we need to work together with electrical DSO, but also with gas transportation and electricity transmission in order to make a joint planning. From our perspective, that means that without any kind of prejudice, which is better gas or electricity, we need to see which is the best solution to achieve the target set by the commissions at the lower cost in terms of investment. And we would like that from a customer point of view, without again prejudice, we let the customer select the solution they feel more comfortable, either from a technical point of view, but also from a cost point of view. So there is the concept of the hybrid solution. So to make available to the final customer multiple solution, electrical solution, low carbon gases solution, or heating solution. And I think that what is important to do that, we need to identify if there are lack of regulation or lack of legislation that can help both the gas and the electricity sector to couple, so to work together and to find, to achieve the objective I said before. So reach the low carbon, zero carbon economy at the lowest cost from an investment point of view. That means the lowest cost from the customers. In the meantime, I think it's true what Christian was saying, that we don't have a lot of time, but I think some pilot project together between gas DSO and electrical DSO should be developed to demonstrate that the sector coupling can be very effective, both for an investment point of view and for the customer point of view. And therefore, I'm open, and I'm going to finish my my speech, leaving to listen what the other colleagues are going to tell us about this important argument that is the sector coupling. Thank you, team, and thank you for everybody for having listened to me.
Thank you, Mr. Gallo. Very, very clear points as well. I think it's a very, very good opening from both sides, and they seem to be reaching hands to work together towards this very challenging transition. Now it's time for the company's perspective. So the members of both associations. From the side of E.DSO, we have Juan Luis Rios Sanchez from Iberdrola and Torsten Knopp from E.ON. And from the GD4S side, we have Catherine Leboul-Proust from GRDF. So this, let's say, this section has 15 minutes, and we'd like to divide it as equal as possible between the members of E.DSO and GD4S. It might be a bit more challenging with the two speakers from the electricity side, but this is how we'll try to manage. So both, let's say, maybe 8 minutes E.DSO and then 7 minutes GD4S. So Juan Rios, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So first of all, let me introduce myself. I am an engineer, although I have some financial background, I still consider myself as an engineer. And when we go to universities, we face very complex problems with cross implications, and we are asked to use Pareto principle. That basically states that for many outcomes, roughly 80% of the consequences come from 20% of the causes, or 80% of the solution can be achieved with 20% of the actions. Well, the reality is that right now in EU27, 75% of carbon emissions come from transport, which is the only sector that has increased emissions since 1990, and right now is the largest sector for emission, power, energy use in industry and building. And Fit for 55 required to accelerate. It's a mandate for us to accelerate and act more vigorously to achieve the ambitious targets for 2030. So the question is, should we current efforts focus on 80% of the sector activity that produce 20% of the emissions? Or should we, because we have to accelerate, this is our mandate, should it be the other way around? So in all the sectors that I have mentioned before, 75% of emission, electrification and decarbonization of power sector provide now large-scale solutions to reduce the majority of carbon emissions. And now it means with mature technology and in an efficient way. Does it mean that electrification will eliminate absolutely all emissions in EU? Not at all. So there will still be, of course, niche areas that will need molecules as energy carriers. The most likely development for these cases will be in hydrogen valleys, where production and consumption will be mainly locally. So the largest efforts should really concentrate on reducing the 80% of emissions. The second message I want to deliver is related to infrastructure. So hydrogen networks are being proposed as an energy carrier, based partially on gas, current gas infrastructure. There has been even proposals to make a whole hydrogen network in EU. Although there are still two main uncertainties. The first one is really the maturity of the technology, and I think it's important to say that. So mainly when you compare this with technologies as mature as renewables, 10 to 20 years of maturity, or energy networks, 100 years of maturity. And also the economics that doesn't seem to be still okay right now with the current technology, doesn't seem to be very good if you compare with electricity networks or shipping. Okay, so I think this is also really important. Again, let's apply the Pareto principle. We already have the efficient and mature technology to transport energy can be used to abate 80% of carbon emission. So the non-regret technology right now is really electricity grids. Again, does it mean we don't need sector coupling? Again, not at all. We need sector coupling, of course. So we wouldn't be here with the colleagues of GD4S. So we need sector coupling to address the use cases and hard to abate sectors where decarbonization by electricity network, heat pumps, and so on, it's less efficient or it's impossible. Okay. So the third message I want to deliver is the role of DSOs. So electrical DSOs, we have been operating and planning in an exponentially complex and sophisticated environment, which is currently happening now. So in the last decade, we have invested heavily in smart grids that have allowed to integrate massive renewables. In fact, we have seen before that the only sector with massive reduction in carbon emission has been the power sector during the last 2 decades. We are right now managing system with two-way direction of flow of electricity that change in seconds, and we are using extensively flexibility in order to defer grid reinforcement. So the reality is that these are the current DSO what we are doing. So it's important that we DSOs we retain these capabilities and these functionalities, and we enlarge in order to cope with the challenges of the Fit for 55. And finally, my last message, it also comes with a principle, which is one size doesn't fit all. So the situation is very, very different across Europe. So you got massive renewable resources in the south with Sound, for example, much more gas infrastructure in Northern and Central Europe, different demand of hydrogen across Europe, different needs of residential heat during winter or residential cold during summer across Europe. So the problem is extremely complex to fix with a unique solution. There isn't a one and only truth here. So I think the regions must find a role, each region, for current gas infrastructure and hydrogen. And this role might be totally different across different regions in Europe. This is really relevant, which will depend on the existing infrastructure, the current needs, and the potentialities. So eventually, we should have some European framework that will consolidate all this. But right now, the focus clearly should be at local or national regional level. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Juan. So now we can go over to Torsten.
Thanks, Tim. I'll try to make it brief. Just to put that thing a bit in perspective, as far as I know, the idea of this session was to have 3 different company perspectives, one from the electricity side, one from a group of DSOs that has both electricity and gas, and one, of course, from the gas side. So this is the mixed approach. Next chart, please. I'd like to show you an example what we did in view of sector integration and what's necessary in order to embed that and to integrate sectors on a local and regional level. E.ON did a digital twin for the city of Essen, and this is just to say we really went into the details, looking at each building, when it was built, how does it heat, who is going to live there, what is their income, what are their capabilities, and so on. Next chart, please. And we did that for the city of Essen, which has 600,000 inhabitants. And then we devised different scenarios. Could I have the next chart, please? Then we devised different scenarios for 2050 for the heating. You see the heat maps here on the left-hand side. You see what's going on at the moment. Red, obviously, is gas, and you'll see that in all possible scenarios there will be less gas, but there will be a green gas scenario where you still have your renewable gas in there. There's a scenario that provides direct electricity heating. There's a scenario that provides electrification mostly through heat pumps. And there's a scenario that very heavily relies on the blue thing, which is district heating. And to have this detailed study, if you have a look at the next chart as well, you have different scenarios, 5 different scenarios, and I don't want to go into the details, of course, because we're not going to talk about the study and the results, but we had a look at what does this mean for CO2 emissions, what does it mean for the cost that different households have to spend on energy, so that is an important point. Then what does it imply for rates of modernization for energy efficiency, and what does it mean for the grids, and especially, of course, for the electricity low voltage grids, but also for how does the gas grid develop, what different uses do you have for the gas grid. And I think this is a good approach that shows you that sector integration on a local and regional level does indeed make sense, even far forward looking, and that it has to rely on data. You can't do this thing without sufficient data. And that brings me to my last chart, which says, yes, I think that smart energy system integration at local and regional level is a necessity. And I think when discussing sector integration, we have the whole system approach, and we far too rarely look at the local and regional level. But the whole energy transition, the whole decarbonization effort is built bottom up through integrated energy systems of different sizes. The smallest one is the active consumer, and then it gets larger and larger. And that's where we already have to bring systems together. And we have to do that between the system operators, system planning, development of operation, between the DSOs. We have to leave market mechanisms in place, but we have to do it in a smart way. We have to digitalize, we have to use data. And that's why I've shown you this example. Data really is the key. And then we have to implement smart grids as the tool for integrating systems. And you can't do this if you reach a certain size without somebody facilitating it, without somebody bringing it forward. And that's the role of the DSOs. That's the role of the DSOs, together devising ways how to get there. And not only among themselves, also if you have this Essen example, handing out incentives for energy efficiency measures, identifying what can be done where. And you can only, of course, not do that as a DSO on yourself, but you need to be embedded in regions, municipalities, and civil society. And in contrast to Juan,
thank you, Torsten.
last sentence.
Okay,
Tim,
last point.
sentence.
Okay.
In contrast to Juan, I'd say I think that we could very well start at the European level with the definition of responsibilities and interfaces in order to kickstart this, because the whole decarbonization effort will probably not be as efficient as it can be without bringing systems together at a local and regional level. Thank you for your patience, Tim.
Okay, thanks to you, Torsten. I really like the example and the simulations you show. As an academic, I can only applaud for this facts-based, data-driven, let's say, trade-off analysis or complementary analysis of the different energy vectors and solutions. So now over to Catherine, please, from GRDF and from GD4S.
Hi, can you hear me well?
Yes, perfect.
Great. So hello all, I'm very pleased to share with you a complementary point of view on behalf of GD4S, which gather European gas distributors. Later, Paolo Gallo has highlighted that gas infrastructure can accommodate a large variety of renewable and low carbon gas. But besides renewable gases, sector coupling is also a key success factor for us to the energy transition, and that's what I am going to detail. As European as gas distributors, we believe in 4 key levers to succeed in reaching a fully decarbonized system. First, adapt networks to a distributed energy supply with significant intermittency in the electric production. Second, adopt a holistic approach. Many of you have highlighted it, based on efficiency of the energy system as a whole, with an objective approach on cost and global life cycle analysis. That's very important. Third, build on the consumer's behaviors and expectations in terms of cost efficiency, circular economy, local production. And from the consumer point of view, I'd like to stress one thing, is that above all, it's very important to give them the choice in between different solutions and not to reduce it to one. That's a great expectation from customers. And 4, shape a regulatory framework and market design. So in the next slide, I just wanted to recall why gas is a core pillar of the energy transition. Just have a look on these 2 graphics where you see the enormous storage capacity and therefore security that gas grids can provide to the energy system. It's true today, and it will be more tomorrow with the uptake of the intermittent electric renewables. It's important also to know that in terms of cost, when you compare the different solutions in terms of storage, gas storage is very, very competitive. So today, Europe has the opportunity to have an existing and extensive gas grid that can manage large energy fluctuation, and it's a real opportunity for the Europe and the security of supply. So next, let's have a look at a distribution level. You can see on that slide that sector coupling in between electricity and gas distribution relies on several solutions. And these solutions have been studied, but they have also been experimented, rolled out and developed. Upstream, the technology of power to gas, most of you have yet underlined it, can maximize the use of renewable energy sources, allowing a greater penetration of intermittent renewables, such as wind and solar. It relies on electrolysis that enables to convert intermittent electricity supply into hydrogen, which can be injected into the networks. We have tested it and it works. Downstreams, sector coupling relies on technologies such as hybrid heat pump and micro cogeneration. So, as a conclusion, from the customer point of view, sector coupling is about integration of transport, where electric and gas mobilities complete each other and offer options to end users free. And that's a key point. I think it's very important to let end users free to assess the best choice in terms of carbon cost reduction efficiency. It may depend on areas and customer portfolio, and it's very important to provide them with the largest portfolio of solutions and not to reduce it just to one. And second conclusion is that flexibility in heat consumption is important, with key attention to avoid and limit peak demand and create a large demand side capacity, especially through hybrid heating solution and micro cogeneration. Third, develop hydrogen as a bridge to optimize renewable energy production and storage. And this evolution, besides the development of renewable gas, which is this evolution will require an evolution in the regulation in terms of network planification and reflecting the positive externalities in the end users' energy tariffs. That's a key point, to assess cost with an assessment of also positive externalities. And in the oncoming European policies, all technology, we believe that all technology options should be treated on an equal basis and evaluated in terms of their effective decarbonization potential and their cost in an energy system perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Very clear. I think it was very interesting to see the different perspectives. And I fully agree with the point about that we need an evolution in the regulation of network planning and also in the way that we do the modeling, because in the end, it seems that we need a lot of information and a lot of detailed modeling about the different technologies and a lot of assumptions about which everybody can debate. And I think this is also at the basis of the discussion of today. So over to the panel. So we have several panelists today, which will talk about their specific case studies. We will start with electricity and gas in transport. So a case, I think it is from Paris. And then we go into heating. So we actually really talking about sector integration, integrating all different sectors. And then we'll have the viewpoint of ENTSO G and ENTSO E, so the transmission operators, or at least the European Association of Transmission Operators. And then we'll end with a viewpoint from the regulator, from Annegret Gröbel from SEER. So first, up to Florent Savy and Alexander Auger to talk about their case study about the integration of transport. So I will have to be strict, 5 minutes together, please. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll fit in two, thanks. Can you hear me well?
Yes, hear you perfect.
Perfect. So now, as a practical example of the complementarity of both energies, Alexandre Roger and I, Florent Savy, will show you what we do in a big public transport authority. You can go next slide, please. Then the next one again. So we are from Ile-de-France Mobilité. Ile-de-France Mobilité is the Ile-de-France Region Transportation Authority. We work on 10,000 buses and coaches, operated from around 140 operational buses centers, which we call also depots. The energy transition of buses and coaches has begun since 2018.
Oh, sorry. I think, Florent, there's something, we don't hear you anymore.
About 75% for biomethane vehicles and 25% for electric vehicles. We can go next slide, please. The two energies and the percentage of each of them were chosen for their complementarity and the relative weight of their pros and cons. So first, about the biomethane. Natural gas buses are known for a long time now, so the sector is mature, the costs are controlled, and the vehicle innovative and ecological sector. And finally, using a biomethane buses is quite the same as using diesel buses, so it's as easy to operate. But the technology has also some cons. It's locally a source of noise emissions and air pollutant. It's impossible to convert a depot which is confined or underground.
Okay, now about electric buses. The two main advantages are, of course, the absence of local emissions and the drastic noise reduction. The technology is also simpler and hence easier to maintain. However, the costs are still very much higher than for gas, both for infrastructure and rolling stock. The batteries are still an issue in terms of autonomy and recycling, and you cannot find all the vehicle types in electric for now. So even if you need substantial electric installations to compress the gas in the depots, the complementarity of both energies in our model is mostly geographic. Electric in the dense center with shorter routes and a need of true zero emissions. And biomethane farther away with more important autonomies required. So now, before being able to receive clean buses, modification works must be done to the infrastructure because there are no clean buses without clean operational bus centers. Hence, work is in progress for the region to bring gas and electricity to each parking space. That's the way we do it. And by the end of the year, we will already have 26 fully operational sites, 20 with gas and 6 with electricity, for a total of 3,300 parking spaces ready to welcome buses. To fill these newly transitioned spaces, we are also dedicated to buying the new buses. If RATP continues to buy the new vehicles by itself in the central perimeter, we have also started to do it ourselves for standard buses and coaches with the help of CATP, which is a central purchasing agency. And by the end of the year, the total number of operational vehicles will be 2,000, 1,400 being biomethane and 600 electric buses.
The bulk of the region energy transition for buses is clearly defined and its objective already ambitious, yet we must continue to investigate new opportunities to prepare the future. That is why we have a technological watch on biomethane, electricity and hydrogen. We study the development of fast charging and trolley buses and also experiment hydrogen buses. To conclude, we can say that none of the energies are the unique solution. Each energy answers to a specific need, and it is why Ile-de-France Mobilité has chosen the mix we have presented to you today. That's all for us. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexandre and Florent. Very clear presentation. Very nice to see how you are really testing the different solutions and looking at how things evolve. Now over to heating with Alix Chambry from Wiesmann. Alix, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So today I want to speak about our sector. If you move on to the next slide, I want to start with the objectives of the current Fit for 55 package and the EU renovation wave. So I want to start with a number, -60%. So -60%, this is the objective for greenhouse gas reduction from buildings compared to 2015. So it means that the objective is to reduce by more than half the amount of emissions in 15 years. And this can only be achieved via a mix of decarbonized energy carrier and energy efficiency. And here our core message is we need both direct electrification and we also need green molecules and green fuels. If you move on to the next slide, I want to tell why sector integration is so critical for the achievement of this -60% target. And the first reason is energy system resilience. If you move on to the next slide, you see a snapshot in the peak demand from heating on the left side from Germany and on the right side from France. And if you would take the EU average, it will be the same picture. Basically, you see here the peak load demand, which is related to heating, is in Germany 3 times higher in winter than in summertime, and in France 4 times higher. And if you take the German example, you see in red the current electricity demand for gas and electricity in Germany alone. And you see that today, the whole seasonality of the heat demand is covered by gas. And actually today, the storage capacity of the gas network in Germany is 6,000 times higher than the electricity storage capacity. So you see already the challenge if we go only for direct electrification. If you move on to the next slide, you see, and here I would like to take a bit of time to show you what is at stake and why we need sector coupling, because very few people have the data in mind. Here you see on point letter A on the graph, the amount of capacity we are removing from the German market because of the coal and nuclear exit. So the phase out of coal power plants and nuclear power plants. So you see that we are removing up to 36 gigawatts from the current capacity in Germany. But on top of this removal, we are electrifying both e-mobility, so the transport sector, and we are electrifying the building sector. So here you see that we are removing 36 gigawatt capacity because of coal and nuclear exit, but we are adding more than half of the current capacity within the next 10 years. And this assumes that we would add just 5 million heat pumps on the current building stock. So those are very conservative figures. We did this study with Frontier Economics. We took on purpose extremely positive assumptions on heat pumps. So the gap could be actually even higher. So you see here that the direct electrification scenario for building and transportation without building on sector coupling on hydrogen and green gases does not look very realistic. If you move on to the next slide, another good reason for sector integration between gas and electricity is that we need to reduce the cost of the transition, and we do that by a balanced energy mix. So if you move on to the next slide, you see a summary which was done by Guidehouse within an alliance that's called Hybrid Heating Europe that we have built together with GRDF and Groupe Atlantique and a bunch of utilities from the gas and electricity sector from France, the Netherlands, and Germany. And together, we aligned to assess what is the role of hybrid heating, what is the role of sector coupling, and what are the lessons. And here you see on this graph, you see a summary of the energy system savings you can have with a balanced mix of green gas and electricity. If you move on to the next slide, you see also from the perspective of the end user, you see that the capital expenditure from the installation of electric heat pump versus a condensing boiler is pretty different. Therefore, you need to take that perspective into account. I understand I have to go faster. Next slide. The building stock is highly heterogeneous. A one-size-fits-all doesn't fit. The broader the options, the more likely our chance to meet the net zero goal by 2050. Therefore, we need a mix of flexible solutions, including hybrids. If you move on to the final slide, next. Finally, we say optimize sector coupling with the right product offering. If you move 2 slides further, I wanted to underline that sector coupling is not only gas heat pump hybrids, but also self-consumption. With self-consumption models and the coupling with electric charging, you can turn buildings into micro power plants and prosumers, and this is also a very important dimension of the energy transition. So if you move on to the next slide, you have the summary, basically of the 4 good reasons for sector integration and heating. With the highest one is energy. The most important one is the energy system resilience, reducing the cost of the transition, increasing the amount and the flexibility of solutions available to address the heterogeneity of the building stock, and ensuring a more people-centric transition with more choice, more offers for the achievement of net zero goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex, also for bringing these numbers, because I'm also impressed when I really see the facts of the magnitude of the challenge. So now over to the view of the DSOs. First, we have Alain Cruz from E.DSO, so the electricity TSOs. And then we have Louis Watin from ENSOC, from the gas TSOs. And then to end with Annegret Gröbel from SEER. So Alain, the floor is yours. And Alain, and each panelist now has 5 minutes. So 5 minutes ENSOC, 5 minutes ENSOC, and 5 minutes SEER. Thank you very much. Alain, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here with the DSO conference because I think indeed, let's say there is an integration also between DSOs and TSOs that increases as, let's say, the whole decarbonization goes forward. If we look at the next slide, there are some major trends in the power sectors and clearly driven by the political ambition, which has been presented to us. But those targets are really pushing forward and are going in a change that is unprecedented. Also increases complexity. But it also gives new opportunities. So things are happening in generation, things are happening in consumption. So from that perspective, there is, let's say, a lot to pick up and to take on board. But what we definitely know, we cannot longer consider our power system as something separated of other sectors. As Christoph also mentioned, let's say the separate pillars are definitely not separate anymore, and we need to integrate it and to look at it. So we need to look at a system-wide perspective. On the right, some targets, drivers, looking only at the electric power system, which we also have to take into account during this part. We have talked a lot about other things, but we shouldn't forget this one to keep security supply high. If I go to the second or the third slide, so to say, indeed, what has also been mentioned, the flexibility, the variability of solar and wind, which in Europe we're counting on, is delivering the challenge that is unprecedented. However, we see that the electricity is the cheapest way to get to decarbonize energy, and we need to be smart with that one. So looking at the patterns from solar and wind and looking how the direct electrification can help, so far we have always seen that if we're able to accommodate direct electrification without the conversions to another modality, that is still an efficient way. So we should aim to keep looking at that part. But definitely there is an integration needed with either power to heat or power to gas, because we cannot cope with it only on the electric part together with batteries, for example. So we need to look at those flexibility challenges. But what we do recognize, we should also be careful. We should look at the flexibility that we introduce should also be green. So looking at guarantees of origin when we transfer electricity into another power to heat or power to gas should go helping the system and not against the decarbonization targets. How do we want to do this is something that we prepared on the next slide. And that is something that we cannot do alone. We have introduced a multi-sectorial planning support, which also shows how in the existing cooperation we already have for a couple of years with ENSO-G, we're looking at how can we improve the smart sector integration, looking at the different cost-benefit analysis, enhancing the flexibility, and a lot of flexibility is something that we're seeking into the consumers area. So working with the DSOs to look at how new kind of profiles, how the scenarios can work out is something that we definitely need to work together. But doing this also requires a high level of transparency, stakeholder involvement. We need to build on existing processes, is our belief, because we don't have time to lose to start something new. So looking at delivering a timely integrated infrastructure, we have the feeling that building upon what's already ongoing and work together is the right way forward. The joint scenarios as such is also something that is crucial in this one, because that means we have a common understanding. Like we saw already today in the different speeches, there are different ideas, there are different possibilities, different opportunities. And I think we cannot exclude either one of them. We need to figure out where is what better, because indeed there is some legacy, there are some opportunity, and how to make that work, because there is not one size fits all in our idea. The way ENSO-E also looks at bringing this forward is also trying to indicate where we see possibilities, coming with position papers, for example, operational patterns, how to help the wind and solar offtake, where to locate the different facilities, because indeed, as has been shown, if we need to transport it by electricity, it has another impact than transport it with gas. But let's be smart on that one. And from that perspective, looking at my last slide to also look at the time, I think, let's say, what ENSO-E is looking for is definitely we need to go to a system of systems where everything counts and everything should be taken into account on different levels. So we need to look at the geographic area, we need to look at the time levels, the different interfaces, and how to make this work, that it works together and doesn't create bigger chaos or more CO2 emissions. And that means stronger, not only cross-border cooperation, but also stronger local cooperation with the DSOs in the different areas. And in that respect, also from electricity DSOs, we definitely recognize the added value from gas for long-term storage. So
Alain, maybe the last words. Sorry, yeah. The last words, so we can, for the timing.
Yeah, I will do that. So we see the benefits of gas for long-term storage, but mainly at this moment for long-term storage. So happy to engage also in the discussions or questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Alain. So now we go over to Louis from ENTSOC.
Thank you, Tim, and thanks a lot for having me here today. It's a real pleasure. I may start with following up on what Juan was saying a little bit earlier. Also, as an engineer myself, I know from the Pareto principle that the last 20% progression costs you 80% of the total investment. And that's why we need all the technologies that are available. And the good news I could see so far is that there is a common idea among all the speakers that today we need all systems to deliver a net zero energy system. And I think this is very important. We may just have different views on which technology is the most efficient one, in which sector and to which extent. But this is absolutely normal because we are just at the beginning of the transition. And this is also why at NSOG we call for technology neutrality and level playing field, so that the technologies are always selected in the best interest of the European society and not on ideology. Fortunately, another good news is that we have learned in the recent years when working together with our electricity colleagues from ENSOI that when it comes to sector integration, 1 + 1 usually makes much more than 2. And that's what we can see in this slide. If we take a look at the energy system, even if this very simplified overview from a TSO perspective, which could also be actually a DSO perspective, we see many possible interactions. If we look from the left-hand side and the supply, we can see that the energy sources will change from a shift from fossil-based fuels to renewables. That's clear, and that will include some rather steady production, like biomethane, for instance, but even more significant shares of intermittent electricity renewables. On the conversion side, power generation from gas will no longer come only from gas-fired power plants like it is today, but multiple solutions can emerge, and with a key role also for power to gas, so the other way around, to make the best use of renewable electricity capacities, of course. We also know that surplus from electricity generation will not be enough to satisfy the future energy demand, especially on the gas side, and that the future hydrogen needs will also drive the development of wind and solar capacities. Now, if we look on the demand side, sectors like transport and industry will shift to electricity or gas as the renewables develop, of course. And consumers may also become prosumers, and some technologies will enable some interaction at consumer level for short-term flexibility. We could think about the vehicle to grid that is represented here, that can provide basically electricity back to electricity when needed, or even gas to electricity via the fuel cells vehicles. So those are the kind of things we see happening, we see can happen, and what we have learned from our T1DP scenarios with ENSOI is that all those different interactions we see there are as many opportunities for the energy system to decarbonize. And we need to make use of all of them to reach net zero. No system can make it alone. They all rely on one another. This also comes with a lot of challenges, since system integration adds a lot of complexity in the overall system, of course, partially due to the intermittent nature of viable renewables. And typically, as we will need larger amounts of renewables coming from the electricity system, in return, it can be supported by the flexibility of the gas system. So Alan mentioned the gas storages for the seasonal flexibility. That could also be the gas system for its inertia as more shorter term flexibility, because we balance every 24 hours on the gas side, which is also very convenient. Maybe if we go to the second slide, another picture, mainly to say the same thing, but from a different angle. Sector coupling is not only about TSO or DSO. It will be at every level. It will start at local and national level with the DSOs and the TSOs, and it will require the larger TSO infrastructure to make it a European market or even part of a global market. Typically for hydrogen, we see the hydrogen valleys or clusters can develop with production and demand located in the same area, where the DSO systems will deal with most of the interlinkages like electrolyzers, demand management, etc. Another possibility that we see emerging is the large scale offshore to produce then large quantities of hydrogen, for instance, that then need to be transported and distributed to the larger demand centers, which are not close to the production. And eventually to have European markets, to have a competitive European market that makes the commodity cheaper. All those pieces need to come together, and that's where also the transmission infrastructure is key. One thing that probably needs to be understood when discussing DSO, TSO, it's not always super easy because the limit between the two is different depending on the country. So what we call a regional TSO network in France, for instance, would be a DSO network in Germany. So even here, the boundary is not always super clear, but then I prefer to talk geographical location. I hope you can follow me. So in this context, an integrated infrastructure planning is key. I guess that's kind of obvious at EU and national level, and it has to be consistent. Again, with further system integration, 1 and 1 is more than 2. And if you focus on each country to reach carbon neutrality on its own, it adds up to the challenge. And some countries may reach it more easily than others. And this is where an integrated and coordinated planning, not only among the different sectors, but also among the different infrastructure operators, is key. And the effort to reach carbon neutrality is reduced when all sectors and all regions can coordinate. So you can
Louis, if you can conclude, please.
I will
wrap
up then. Yeah, that's just important that we try to capture with the all the different aspects of this cooperation that is needed between the TSOs and the DSOs in our TNOP scenarios, for instance, but also with all the other sectors. And in general, at ENSOC, this translates not only in an intensive stakeholder engagement in each and every steps of our processes, but also by making available all the data, all our methodologies, so that with the other sectors, we can ensure consistency and compatibility of our models, so that we do not centralize the planning activities, but we ensure we all understand each other, and that for our activities, we develop everything in a collaborative way. So yeah, maybe the main message will be now, let's work all together. Thank you.
Thank you, Louis. Also very comprehensive. And now, as in practice, the last word is for the regulator. Annegret, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you also for the other speakers. I think it's a very broad and comprehensive discussion. So I would like to make a few remarks from the perspective of the regulators. And indeed, we can just move on to slide number 4. Because we, and the next one, yes. So that is what I want to present today. We as CR have decided to have a new strategy, the CR strategy 2022-2025. And we put in the focus the consumer. So we want to empower consumers for the energy transition. And we have 3 major regulatory dimensions. And in fact, the first one is what we are talking about today in a bit broader context. We were mentioning it here as sector coupling. We think that this goes beyond, and therefore we have taken up the wording or the terminology of the Commission, of the European Commission. And the first dimension for us is enabling energy system integration, integrating renewables and incentivizing innovation. And this is to be understood in the very broad sense that it does not only relate to electricity and gas, but also, as was mentioned today, to heating, to cooling, and other mobility, of course, other sectors, to in fact draw out the economies and the synergies that we can have if we have a more integrated system. That is the first aspect. The second, as I said, we are placing consumers at the center of energy markets with a consumer-centric dynamic regulation. And here we want to do this to empower consumers to actively contribute to and benefit from a flexible energy system. So we see the two sides. Very often it is forgotten that consumers have a role, and a more active role according to the clean energy package, and I guess also in the future from the gas decarbonization package, we will see the same role or an increased role for consumers, so that they benefit also from them, but that they also provide input and benefits and flexibility among among all to the system as a whole, so that it is a let's say win-win situation for both. And we think that this has often been forgotten. So that is an aspect that we as regulators want to place in the center. And the last dimension is, of course, that we are very much convinced that regulation and well-functioning and resilient markets must go hand in hand, so that all this can work only if the market design is proper, and we see that there are efficient price signals, so to reflect scarcity, to reflect the value of flexibility. I just saw this question in the chat that I think we need to integrate. I won't use the word holistic, but I want to make sure that indeed, if we follow this approach, this implies also valuing flexibility in a way that it can compete, and that the price signal is reflecting the value for the system, for example, as a sort of opportunity cost for building new infrastructure or things like that. So I think there are various measures that can be taken, or various ways of integrating it and of measuring it, and therefore bringing it as an element, as an active element into the equation, so to speak, as an important element to make the system as a whole more flexible. And of course, here we see that the markets in that sense then allow to deliver flexibility and of course new business models. And this implies for us also active consumers, active customers. And these three regulatory dimensions are just highlighted on the next slide. But I have already mentioned the main elements of this. In the center, we have the Vision 2030, where we have the Aspire principles on how we want or how we see the consumer and how we see the consumer's role in a flexible energy system based on well-functioning markets and an integrated energy system. So we can directly move on to the next slide, please just activate all the boxes where we have, thank you, shown that each of these regulatory dimensions has two more concrete areas of where we want to be active and which we want to influence in a targeted way to empower consumers for the energy transition. And I think the two upper hand green boxes are the one, in particular, the decentralized and local energy are the ones that are most relevant for today's topic. The other ones complement this, and the whole thing needs to be seen together. I'll go on to the next slide, and in the interest of time, I will only focus on the two green boxes. And the first one, indeed, is the consumer-centric design. We understand there that we, on the one side, want to ensure that consumer rights and protection, is transferred into the new flexible world. One of the most important things where we see a lot of potential, which is yet untapped, is energy efficiency. Energy efficiency first as a principle. We want to take into account that consumers are different. Not all consumers are automatically active and are ready to take a dynamic contract, etc. So we are well aware of this, that there are also groups, consumers that are, let's say, are probably more passive, and we want to make sure that the regulation can reach all different groups. Last but not least, that energy poverty and vulnerability is dealt with, so that no one is left behind. But that is something that we want to make clear requires not only regulatory tools, but is a task that goes beyond. And as the Commission has outlined with the Fit for 55 package and before, there is, for example, this fund to ensure that consumers that no one is left behind, and that is important for us. It's not a core regulatory task, but a core regulatory objective. So again, this is an element that we need to see together. And of course,
Annegret, if you can conclude.
Wrap up, yes. And
yes.
Then on the lower right-hand side, we have the energy communities as a new active group or possibility of active participation. Of course, self-consumption, demand-side response, peer-to-peer trading in the future, distributed energy resources, and new business models in a nutshell, all the new elements to tap the decentralized and local energy. I think I can skip to the last slide, the conclusions. I have mentioned already this. These are some parts of our work program for next year. And here we have the conclusions that we want to support the energy transition and that we see that we have a very, very important role. We put the consumers in the center and want them to be empowered to actively participate, while we don't want to be to leave anyone behind. We aim to have a European framework and to implement it in a way with concrete regulatory solutions that provide the necessary flexibility at the distribution level. We as CR, of course, have these regulatory principles and aim for a consistent application across Europe so that the markets overall become more integrated, also retail markets, not only the wholesale markets, for the benefit of all European citizens. So that is our vision that goes beyond what we call the Vision 2030, but that is implemented here with our new strategy, which will run from 2022 next year onwards until 2025. And we hope to catch the effects and the new design that are necessary to make the to reach climate neutrality and the other goals of the Green Deal. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Annegret, for this viewpoint from the regulators, very consistent principles. So now, luckily, we're talking a lot about flexibility. There's also a bit of flexibility in the agenda today. So we have about 25 minutes for the Q&A, and then there's the closing remarks. So the Q&A session, I think that everybody from the panel or who was talking before could open their camera if they wish. It makes it easier for me to point to somebody who would like to answer the question. So I saw that already some questions, there were many questions already submitted, some of them already answered. Maybe we can start with one question about governance, and it's a question from Jan Kostvek, I think from Acer, and there was another question already answered by Torsten Knop, which was similar. If we go towards more sector integration, it could mean that assets different than lines or the cables or pipelines need to be invested in. These assets might not always be owned by DSOs or TSOs, while TSOs and DSOs are the ones who have to make these network plans. So the question is there any potential issue I think, a sort of conflict of interest in terms of network operators who have to build these plans and prepare these plans, and their role as asset owner. So I wonder, is there anybody who would like to pick up? Okay, Torsten, you're first. Please go.
Thanks, Tim. I think that the predominant interest of system operators, and I think also regulatory incentives, as Annegret Gröbel said, provide a valuable tool there. The main objective of system operators is an efficient system and an efficient addressing the challenges we face in the time ahead. And I think that this coincides exactly with what, that's why I also said it has to be with regional and local authorities and the civil society. That coincides with their demand for an efficient decarbonization effort. And what we've heard again and again by many of the participants today is that together with an integrated system, and I'd always add at a local level, at a regional level, we will be more efficient than if everybody is doing their own thing on their own. And I'm quite sure we want an efficient system because we are regulated in such a way, but because we also, as E.ON, for example, have an obligation to the civil society, to governments, to regional authorities, to local authorities to achieve that, and because we want to go the right way for the decarbonization effort. So I wouldn't worry too much about investing more or investing less or this or that or here or there. We really need to mobilize incentives. That's the real investment. That's the real challenge. And I think we are all on the same track there.
Okay, very clear. Is there anybody who would like to add to Torsten? Okay, Alain, please go.
Yeah, because maybe, yes, we have this efficiency, but I think it's also good to recognize that, let's say, if we as a TSO would choose something and another TSO would have a better solution, we're being benchmarked by the regulator, and we have to earn our return back in the next 40 years, because that's usually the depreciation time. So the risk to just come up with a solution that is not efficient because of this benchmarking is a realistic risk, which indeed also pushes us to go for the most efficient route. So I think the system in itself is helping not to take the wrong decisions as such.
Okay, so I think Alain and Torsten are saying that the current regulatory framework is actually fit for this challenge. I don't know if Annegret, you are also willing to comment to it.
Yes, maybe I agree with very much that all are interested in an efficient outcome, and I think that is the way that we should set the incentives from a regulatory perspective as well. And ACER and CR have made in their position papers with regard to the 10E network planning, several proposals to avoid that there is a conflict of interest, but that at the same time, for example, network operators, but that of course the planning in the future also integrates non-infrastructure solutions, in other words, flexibility solutions. And this is, I think, currently still being discussed. We think that we know that the planning, of course, requires a lot of technical knowledge, but we see that there is a necessity to have then a let's say neutral checking that the solutions are the most efficient ones and are not biased towards a particular way of reaching the objectives. In other words, investing in infrastructure where possibly a flexibility solution can be considered as efficient as an infrastructure investment. So clearly this implies evolving also the benchmarking, but the important point in terms of governance is here that we suggest that there is a neutral assessment made by ACER, so that the role and of course the NRAs as part of ACER in the BOR and the working groups, and that in that sense then there is this neutral assessment to avoid any sort of conflict of interest which could reduce the quality of the result.
Just to avoid a misunderstanding, Tim, in your summary of what we said before, I don't agree that it's all fine with the regulatory systems we are facing at the moment. I'm confident that we'll together find good ways forward, and I agree with what Annegret Gröbel said, but I'm convinced that we need to evolve the current regulatory framework in many member states towards enabling investments where we aren't at the moment. There's not a framework that enables companies to make the necessary investments for this huge challenge. That's one point, and it has to be developed to accommodate the new role of DSOs, the evolving role of DSOs, both on the electricity and gas side.
Thank you for correcting me, Torsten. I was a bit too quick with my summary of your answers. So now we go over to another question. I see, one common theme in the question box is about hydrogen, of course. So about this question of, I think it's Philippe who asks, what about greening the current hydrogen use? Why to create extra hydrogen use when the current hydrogen use is mostly fossil? It also has to do with a question that has been answered already, like what to do optimally to generate renewable electricity, which is cheap in Spain, turn it into hydrogen and push it through the pipeline up to Central Europe, or to create that hydrogen in Central Europe, or to create renewable electricity in Spain and push it as electricity through a cable to Central Europe. These are very complicated questions, but I would like to hear some of your, let's say, reflections on this. I see Juan Rios, please go.
Yes, thank you very much. So yes. So in fact, I couldn't agree with you more. So clearly, we see that the focus with hydrogen right now could be just moving from the hydrogen that is produced with fossil fuels into green hydrogen as soon as possible, and this should be, in our opinion, so this electrification of hydrogen to really have this green hydrogen, the priority right now with hydrogen. In terms of, because I think there was a bit of confusion when I said that the economics are not so good. The economics for PVs in Spain, they're very, very good, really good, okay? Or like the economics for renewables in other places in Europe. The question is, if you want, let's say, if you want to use green hydrogen as an input in an industry in Germany, where do you get this this hydrogen, which is low carbon or green hydrogen? Okay, where do you get that? So you could have locally produced in the Baltic Seas with the new offshore. Okay, then you produce, and then you turn this as electricity, and you have the electrolyzer close to where you need the input of hydrogen, or you could produce in, let's say, in Italy or in Spain with PVs, and then transport that with electricity grids. Or you could also use, if there wasn't any technological issues, okay, through hydrogen pipelines, or even shipping hydrogen or in the form of ammonia, okay? So with the numbers that we see right now, even if all the technological issues were fixed, were solved, is that there's a huge volatility in terms of the price of hydrogen in Germany, okay? Depending with hydrogen through tube, if it was produced in Southern Europe, which is mainly based on the load factor for that these pipelines will be using. So the economics, as I said before, maybe in the future they will make sense, but right now doesn't make. They don't seem very good. So the reason is, again, if you really want to attack and to accelerate and to have these 2030 goals as soon as possible, you really need to think on big, large scale things that can work right now. So this was one of the things I wanted to insist. Let me also add one thing.
Okay, shortly. Yeah.
unfortunately, we haven't spoken much about energy efficiency, because we speak a lot of sector coupling, then you move gas to power, power to gas, and you lose energy efficiency. So maybe just to remember some of the numbers. So 1 megawatt hour of PV or wind farm, okay, green energy, green electricity, can deliver with my electric vehicle up to 6.5 thousand kilometers driving. If it was an H2 vehicle, it would be 2.5 thousand kilometers. But if you go even to boil, in fact, if you convert that to heaters, to boilers, so 1 megawatt hour of green energy with a heat pump would be 3.5 megawatt hour, but only 0.7 megawatt hour if we use let's say an H2 boiler. Of course, there are a lot of things. Maybe we have to store things. There will be a lot of room for hydrogen and for sector coupling. But my point here is maybe there are some places where we need to really focus on big, large-scale commercial projects that can be delivered now in order to deliver the goals for 2030.
Okay, that's a clear point of view, clear perspective. So I think Alix was first, and then is Mr. Gallo from the gas side to give an answer to this reply.
Yes, I just wanted to share some news because maybe it's not clear for everyone, the linkage between the Fit for 55 package and the hydrogen uptake. I find it extremely interesting in the Fit for 55 package to look at the now binding targets for the share of green gas in transport and the share of green hydrogen for the industrial sector, so hydrogen as a feedstock. If you add up the two binding target, transport and industry for hydrogen, you come up to a needed capacity of 40 gigawatt by 2030. This means that for the market now, there is a guaranteed demand representing up to 40 gigawatt in 2030, which means that there is a high security of investment. That combined with carbon contract for differences, combined with the current plans, like in Spain, we saw in Hydrogen Europe, Hydrogen Europe has made a database, collecting all the investment projects. If you look at the amount of hydrogen project in the pipeline, you see that today there is already 70 gigawatt of capacity planned in Spain, 10 gigawatt in the Netherlands, 5 in Germany. So it's very clear that there are high investment readiness in South Europe. We expect high investment readiness as well in North Africa, Ukraine. So clearly hydrogen is easy to transport. We can repurpose in the existing gas infrastructure. So we are very confident that we will see a high market uptake of green hydrogen in the next 10 years. And on the heating side, on the demand side, I wanted to tell everybody that our gas boilers are ready today already to, all the installed stock is ready to burn already 10% admixture of hydrogen. We are working on the adoption of an eco-design requirement to make sure that all new gas boiler can run with 20% admixtures of hydrogen in the existing grid. And we are calling for a mandatory 100% H2 readiness requirement via eco-design. Just for you to know, we estimate that changing an existing gas boilers to retrofit it so it's suitable for 100% hydrogen admixture would cost only 200 euros when needed. So we are saying it's feasible to make the space heating sector ready for any type of gas blends or 100% hydrogen. Okay. And I wanted to share that good news today.
Thank you very much indeed. Quite surprising numbers. Now, Paulo Gallo, please, your reply.
I would like just to add some concept to what Alix just said, because some of the things that she said, I was ready to say. We need to look over 10 years when we talk about green hydrogen, because it is correct today, green hydrogen cost production is very expensive, so it's not competitive. But 10 years from now, all studies are showing that the green hydrogen will become competitive. And the green hydrogen is the answer to the need of storage. In 10 years from now, each of the European countries will add more and more renewable sources, and we will experience more surplus of energy from renewables. And at this point in time, either you shut down the plant or you reduce and store the energy. Today, the most effective way to store the energy is the pumping station, but that is already completely exploited. So there is no more room for that. Power to gas or transforming the surplus of energy in green hydrogen is the answer to the need of storage. And then the hydrogen, as Alex was saying, can be distributed, transported through the existing gas infrastructure. So we don't need to build new infrastructure to distribute or to transport hydrogen. We can use the existing one with a fully upgrade of being fully digitized. And so in the long-term view, the green hydrogen is the answer to the need of storage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very clear. Is there anybody who would add to this point, or I already take another question? I think if nobody comes in, then I'll take another question. So we already talked about the governance. We already talked about hydrogen versus direct electrification or alternatives. So I'm looking. So, okay, maybe Luis Cunha is the last question, I think. He asks about whether in the clean energy package is said that storage, or actually if you would see P2G as storage, can be invested in by system operators under specific purposes. And would the joint investment, I assume, of gas and electricity DSOs be one of those options? It's actually something that I never thought about. I don't know if anybody has any answer on this. Maybe it's a bit too specific, but it's definitely something that will come up in later debates. So maybe one of my questions is that I found it very interesting that we had the viewpoint of electricity DSOs, we had a viewpoint of gas DSOs, we had a viewpoint of DSOs who do both gas and electricity. So I wonder, maybe as Torsten is representative of one that is both a gas and electricity DSO, do you see that there's a benefit of doing both under one company, or are there some disadvantages of bundling these two in times of sector coupling?
That's an interesting question. I think, of course, it eases things. Definitely, that's the case, and that's not only what we observe, where E.ON operates in many areas, electricity and gas DSO grids in parallel. We already have an integrated planning there. I don't think we really have an integrated operation as far as means steering the grids is concerned, but we do have an integrated operation, for example, as far as servicing the grids is concerned. That is also many convincing examples you'll also see, for example, in the case in Germany and many other member states with lots and lots of municipalities, municipal utilities, Stadtwerke, that are also integrated. And I think they also think integrated. And many times they also have heat. And it makes all three things easier. It makes it easier to plan grids together, it makes it easier to develop them, and it makes it easier to operate them. And it might also make it easier to have the relevant communication with the people all around us, that we are basically all, that our customers, that are the reason for our existence. But this is not to say that where there are different operators operating mostly electricity and somebody else operating the gas grid, that they cannot also agree on that. We only need roles, responsibilities, interfaces for that. And if we don't design them, then indeed these efficiency effects will be restricted to those DSOs where it's one DSO instead of multiple. But I don't think we can afford that. And that is exactly the reason why we need to define that for those cases where there are different operators.
Thank you, Torsten. I agree, and I think it's a very nice, I would say, end to this Q&A, the bridge between the two, because already we already knew the debate about the many DSOs and electricity, for example, in some countries, and then whether you would consolidate those, whether that would have an advantage in terms of, for example, digitalization and skills. But now I don't think you can anytime force the integration of gas and electricity DSOs. I don't think you should. It's probably a legacy, but at least it's something to be thinking about. And at least as long as these interfaces are not too costly, that's definitely not something to push too hard. But these interfaces need to be managed well, which will probably be easier in one context than another. So now it's time. So I would like to thank all panelists for their answers on the Q&A. Now it's time for the closing remarks from Mindaugas Keizeris, who is vice chair from E.DSO, and also the executive chairman of the executive board of E.DSO. So the word is yours.
Yeah, hello everybody, and I'll try to be quick because Tim, you're looking to the watch, yeah, to the clock. It's from one point of view, it's maybe not so hard to speak about electricity and gas and to be neutral for myself, because I am from company which represent electricity and gas at the same time, but I'm speaking on behalf of E.DSO. But in any case, I'll try to be neutral. And listening to all this discussion, it is challenging mindset and very interesting. A wide range of participants, starting with European Commission, SEER, Operators Association, industry, show the importance of the subject and the importance for the sector itself and for the citizens, for our clients, and starting from high fly to deep technological aspects. And it's really not easy to summarize, but obvious that some aspects are different from country to country. There are differences in industries, separate regions or municipal level, or differences between DSOs or TSOs and etc. Natural differences because of maturity of development of networks, maturity of markets, technologies, accessibility to sources of energy, intensity of use, geographical, other circumstances. I heard several times during the presentations and discussions, which I agree that there is no one-size-fits-all solution or golden bullet to solve all the challenges. And there are clear general similarities. Starting from the legislative or political EU agenda or political point of view, strategy and framework should enable and incentivize integration between DSOs, TSOs, speaking about the whole energy mix: electricity, gas, renewables, heat, cool, transportation, hydrogen, buildings, energy efficiency, markets, and etc., etc. And it should enable and incentivize interaction to achieve circular and energy efficient systems, better access, electrification of consumption based on renewables, and there was underlined clear DSO's crucial role in order to create best options for customers. Because what for we are doing this? Because to create better option for customers and to achieve Fit for 55 targets. And of course, in practically all the presentations, all the speeches, there was digitalization was mentioned as one of the main aspects. They were presented different sectors, and their participants provided arguments and share initiatives which correspond to political and legislative strategy. And from one point of view, Torsten presented that I really like the data-driven and data-proved positions, and green gas and hybrid heat pumps deliver convincing results in all dimensions. Data platforms, digital twins, digitalization, smart grids are the main tools, according to the Torsten presentation. At the same time, Iberdrola had got a different point of view and said that electricity is the most efficient way Hydrogen should be developed if clear economic cases are. GRDF stressed that coupling is enabled and provided very interesting examples. Of course, there were examples of other participants really very impressive. I mean, Ile-de-France Mobilités and Wiesmann covering that balanced energy mix reduces system costs. Green fuels, green electricity in heating reduce peak demand. System resilience is very important in any case, in any scenario we will decide to implement or we will implement. And practically in everybody's speech, we said or we assumed or presumed that energy transition requires significant capex investments. And mixed technologies reduce financial burdens for households. And of course, hybrid solutions enable flexibility, enable adapt to client needs. But at the same time, our chair, Christian Boucher, at the beginning of this webinar, put the question regarding the bills and how to avoid the growth of bill or to lower it. And I don't have the answer, but just to think for ourselves, comparing to what? Bill comparing to what? To Aziz situation or comparing to the situation what a bill would be, and if we wouldn't be able to implement the energy transition. What option for selection, what security of supply would be without a capex, without the investment, without the energy transition. And speaking about the summarization or point of view of CIR, Annegret Gröbel, the president of CIR, it is important the regulators put in the center the customers. And of course, probably all of us, we are acting in a benefit of customers, in a benefit of society, economy, and transition, and every participant in this process will contribute and will benefit from the transition. And transition should be empowered by energy system integration for all sectors, placing consumer at the center, ensuring open, well-functioning, resilient markets, and regulatory environment, which is dynamic, must be predictable and stable, not static, but stable, and unlocking flexible solutions, which is very important, as supportive regulatory framework is also important to implement the energy transition. And all the infrastructure operators, all the participants of this webinar, and all the participants of the transition, we spoke about the opportunity, not as the problem, speaking about the sector coupling as an opportunity or challenge. And all the sources will have, energy sources will have a role in the future mix. But all the experts also shared the same view to the challenge and opportunity we are in. And even if there is no one-size-fits-all solution, but still, especially when we are relying on data. Carbon neutrality is the mutual direction. All the stakeholders are in a multi-sectoral environment. It is new normal or something else. And the importance of system reliability is still and will be crucial, or at least very, very essential. And electrification of sector, coupling, integrated, every process should accelerate, and they will accelerate, and they will require to find synergies in coordinating our actions in order to create the most benefit for society, for citizens, and to meet their expectations, which should be balanced, aligned, and synchronized as much as possible. So Thank you for attention.
Thank you very much, Mindogas. I think it's a very comprehensive and complete summary and or clear message of what we discussed about today. I also wrote my 3 points, and it's more or less the same. It's cost efficiency versus speed. We need to do an analysis or network planning considering all energy vectors, but the parameters are uncertain even though we have to move fast. So this is very difficult. The second part is, yeah, governance and regulation matters. The regulatory framework needs to evolve and the incentive matters. And the third one is consumers, that even if we are the most cost efficient as we want, this is still gonna cost quite a bit of money, and how to send the right signals to consumers without harming the energy poor and making this a good case for every citizen. So I think I can thank all speakers and panelists of today, and of course all attendees for the questions. I hope you enjoyed the seminar, and thank you very much. And I'm sure that this is not the last debate about this very important topic, and happy to see the electricity and gas DSOs coming together and openly discuss fact-based discussion about this topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a good
Pleasure.
evening. Pleasure.